All right. So thank you again for being here in this virtual space with me, and agreeing to share a little bit about yourself and your work and how social justice is involved in all that. So, like I've explained, or we've talked about, the course is Introduction to Social Justice. And so I want, my hopes are for the students to be able to see how social justice can be applied in real life and how it's applied differently with different folks. So if you could just please introduce yourself, give yourself a little bit of background about what you do and who you are.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited. I was excited to have this conversation with well, we call her Jazz, but you know, Dr. Rodriguez is her professional name. Um, which I think should just be Dr. Jazz, which I think would be really cool.
I'm down for it.
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
were having like a big old conversation before this meeting even happened, though. But, anyways,
Mhm.
let me give you a little background. My name is Gilberto Partida. I've known Dr. Rodriguez for a very long time now. We've known each other since high school, at least, right? Because we do. Wait, did you
Yeah.
go to middle school with me to Lakeside or Lake
No,
Center?
into Lake Center.
Lake Center, okay, yeah. So I was like, I couldn't remember. I knew you since middle school, but nonetheless,
Close enough.
yeah, close enough, exactly. But we went to school together, and so then I've just known her for a long time. So I've been able to see her journey, and she's been able to see my journey as well through this whole process of just kind of life in general. I'm working as a professional as a trilingual interpreter. So I work with three languages. I work with English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. So I most of my work is done working with the deaf community, but every once in a while I'll work with only hearing people, depending if I'm doing like a Spanish gig or something like that. I've been doing that for probably now 16 years. I've been working as an interpreter, but I was involved in the deaf community before that. Um, I have been involved in my profession in many different ways. So, like, I've done, obviously interpreting in different scenarios. I've done everything from, because the thing about American Sign Language interpreters is that our careers can take different directions compared to like spoken interpreters, because spoken interpreters are kind of limited from what I've seen, at least. Like, maybe some conferences, maybe some courts, some hospitals, like that kind of stuff. With us, we're like everything, like from a hospital, courts, those things, yes, but to a quinceañera, to like traveling, to being on a cruise line, like, you know what I mean? Like, we're in everyone's lives for different parts. So, anyways, so I've been able to interpret in different scenarios because of it. I've also been really involved in my community and in my profession, focusing a lot on interpreters of color and specifically trilingual interpreters. I really helped and push the movement within the field to kind of recognize trilingual interpreters, especially because I'm from Southern California. So we have really big brown and black deaf community here, and so specifically Latinos are the biggest population. So then, for that reason, we use trilingual interpreters, and it wasn't recognized. It was kind of like it was always kind of like a side thing or like a thing that people didn't really like. It was always English. ASL was like the dominant um, culture always being promoted. And so, anyways, I was part of the movement to kind of grow that, and it's been really wonderful. I've met so many wonderful people because of it. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. I don't know. Is there anything else, Jess? I
That's
think that
good. Yeah,
sums it
to
up, right?
start. That's good. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
So since this is a social introduction to social justice course, I'm sharing with the students my definition, and obviously they're getting the definition from the book. But what is your definition of social justice, and what does it mean to you personally?
So when you were telling me you were going to ask me that, I was like, what do I believe in social justice means, right? I think if I was to sum it up, the best way is maybe like the goal of making sure that everyone belongs, that everyone has a sense of belonging wherever they live, are, exist, that they get to feel like they belong in that place. And that looks different, right, for each person. And that includes many things. It's not just, I accept who you are, right? Because it's like my gay ass. The one thing I hated when people used to be like, now it's less because we're like 2000. I mean, people are still homophobes, but you know what I mean, right? It's like 2020. I was about to say 2020, but 2021. So folks are less intense about it. But back in the day, it'd be like, you know, I accept you, but I don't accept your life, or like whatever. Like they would always say that bullshit, right? And you're like, okay, so then you don't accept me. Like, how do you think my life and who I am is separate from? They're not separate. It's who I am, you know. Um, and so I think that when we talk about belonging for people, um, we can't just. It's not enough to say I accept you. It's like how do you create a space where I show you that I accept you?
Mhm.
Um, because words don't mean shit. You know what I mean? Sorry,
Yeah,
excuse my
yeah.
language,
No, no, no,
but you
no.
know,
That's fine. Yeah.
go
So
ahead.
what I hear from that is actions,
Yeah.
right? So social
Yeah.
justice is very much about action.
Right. Absolutely. Actions and because theory is important, but action is, or practice is the next level. So
Yeah.
theory is the very beginning of it. Practice is the next part that you have to incorporate. And so yeah, taking action to make sure that
Hmm.
people belong where they deserve to belong.
Good. Great. Thank you. So
Yeah.
going off of that action in social justice, how do you incorporate social justice into your work or to your life? How does that look?
It's everything I do, and it's not because I'm like a social justice warrior, as people say. It's because it's kind of like the air you breathe. There's no way around it. You know what I mean? Um,
I
Social
do.
justice is yeah, exactly. Social justice is just a term that's used to identify an experience or a thing that you're doing, just like anything in science. Like someone named it air, oxygen, gravity, but like it existed, even you don't have to name it, it exists, it's just floating, doing its thing,
Yeah,
whatever, and
yeah.
we are interacting with it. So social justice to me is just kind of the interaction, but I think it's an intentful interaction. I think that's what makes it social justice, right? So it's like I'm just interacting with whatever is, but I'm being intentful on what my actions and what I do, because I know that what I do in this moment will affect the next step. And so I think that's a big part of it. And so what you do can expect the next step, and it can mean either people do better or they do worse, you know? And so I guess I don't know, the way it incorporated is that I take those all those small interactions and I make sure that it's always going towards what I, which is, this could be my own bias because who knows what that means for me, but you know, that people
Mhm.
are feeling a sense of belonging. So whether it's me, and so now let me break it down a little bit more so you guys can understand how it makes sense within your everyday lives. And I'll give you examples of my everyday lives. Uh, I interact with it from my own. So to give you context, I deal with a lot of mental health. So like I have ADHD. So I've been diagnosed with ADHD, depression, anxiety, and OCD. So like I always tell people I won the mental health lottery. It's like that's just what happened, you know. And it's for different reasons, right? Part of it was genetic, part of it was trauma, and they combine together because there's some things that are genetic that get triggered because of your trauma, right? And so if you were to look at my life that way, like if you were to take my own life as an example, there are so many scenarios that created that, what's happening at this moment, from the trauma I suffered because of poverty, because of this, because of ableism, of not being able to take, you know, there's a lot of things involved that create the space in this moment. So I've always had to battle that and find ways of healing myself, and at the same time also really accepting that the environment isn't necessarily here to tell me that I belong to them or
Mhm.
belong to the environment. So constantly navigating that space has been part of the social justice. I know, like how social justice affects my life,
Mhm.
and then also at work, I work as a sign language interpreter, so I am in the mix all the time in regards to every choice I make affects another person's life. And so I have to deal with that on many levels, from what I have to go through as a trilingual Latino interpreter to me being the hearing person. I am the oppressor of the other folks, and that other folks who are being oppressed have to somehow rely on interpreters who constantly oppress them. It's a weird
Mhm.
relationship. And so all that complexity, really, I have to constantly navigate and think about my choices, whether it's for me to take care of myself, for me to take care of other people, for me to be help other people belong more, or I want to figure out ways to belong more, or sometimes just being like I just don't belong and that's okay. But that's its own thing. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that answered it, but like hopefully that gave
Yeah,
some
it did.
examples of how social
Mhm.
justice kind of affects my life.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing a lot is like intentionality, right? I don't even know if
Yeah.
that's the correct word, but being intentional and reflective of our position, our positionality. And
Yes.
so we talk a little bit about power and oppression and also
Yes.
privilege. We're going to be getting to privilege. We talk
Yes.
about like socialization and how we've gotten to where we're at, how we've been influenced by media, by these systems, the system of
Right.
education, for example, right? And so I think one of the key things for me in social justice is that constant reflection, right? So we had a
Mm-hmm.
conversation before this
Mm-hmm.
about student learning and grades and how do you grade somebody's growth compared to another
Right.
student's growth when they
Right.
start at different playing levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being reflective and inclusive and like you said, having belonging and
Mm-hmm.
it's very intersectional, I think.
Yeah, there's so many things interacting with each other that really create who you are, and I think really being, and it's hard because I know earlier we had talked about the idea of worthiness, but that's ultimately what it kind of does, right? It's
Mhm.
the idea that it messes with your idea of whether you're worthy or not. And so not only are you fighting a sense of belonging and all these things and whatever, but you're also fighting the idea of accepting who you are. It's a really internal like battle, because what you're doing is you're saying, when you say, okay, I'm worthy, right? And so it's like I was telling you earlier, there's a difference between theory and there's practice, right? And I
Mhm.
would say theory is the first step, and then practice is the second step, because practice requires a whole other deal. It's like there's no theory involved. I mean, there is theory involved in the practice, but it's no longer the meat. You know what I mean? It's not the main
Yeah.
meal anymore. It's because when you go into practice, you have to be really vulnerable. You have to be really in, like, sometimes really scared and all these things. And so trying to get back to that place of like, okay, I'm worthy, even though all of this is creating this experience for me, it's probably the hardest part. That's
Yeah.
the hardest part, to kind of, like I said earlier, go from here to here. You know what I mean? Where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm worthy here. Like, okay, here, like, that's right, girl. I'm worthy. What the fuck,
Yeah.
But and then
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
difference of like when you walk into a space and you're like, okay, remember when you said
Yeah.
that? Like,
Yeah.
and you're like, but I still only feel it here. I can't feel it here yet. And it's like, that's a
Hmm.
big part of the,
Yeah.
journey. I
I
think what
think,
it has to do with it.
yeah. Hearing you speak and listening to your words and the message that you're conveying, it reminds me of how sometimes the word social justice has been used as it's been given a negative connotation, right? Some folks are like, social justice is ruining everything, and social justice is this. And I feel that sometimes social justice as a term has been used to talk about like big organizations or like massive global or nationwide movements. But
Mhm.
I think you give a good reminder that social justice is also just within our own self, right?
Yeah,
So an act of social justice might be an act of self care
absolutely.
or
Hmm.
going to get mental health services,
Right.
right? Physical health,
Yes.
like choosing, being reflective on what we're eating and things like that. And because I think it's interesting how these systems, so in the social sciences, we focus a lot on systems and institutions and how
Hmm.
that influences the socialization of people, right?
Right.
So these systems have taught us, like we were talking a little bit earlier, that like the stigma around mental health
Right.
or the stigma of certain foods or habits. So I constantly struggle with guilt of eating fast food or
Mm.
eating quote unquote poorly, right?
Right.
Because I'm constantly these systems have told us that if you're overweight, that you're not worthy,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever it may be, right? So it's constant struggle. I think reflecting and being critical, even critical thinking in that aspect, like, why do I feel this way?
Right.
Why do I feel self-conscious because I'm overweight?
Right.
Where did I get that message, and who's sending
Yeah.
it? And is that a worthy message, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like in our work, we often are um, doing multiple levels of social justice, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Would you
Yes.
agree?
Absolutely. And I think like, and you're doing it for other folks and you're doing it for yourself all the time. And like for example, when you were talking earlier about what perceptions of people, like, it's like, okay, because I'm fat, then therefore people view me a certain way, right? And even the term fat, right? Like, just like being okay with me saying like I'm fat, who cares, I'm fat, what the
Yeah.
fuck. I mean, right now it doesn't look like it because the way I'm positioned in my camera. But Jazz knows. So maybe don't be fooled by this. Everything is in I don't want to the curtain behind the Wizard of
Full
Oz, right?
angle.
Yeah, the big my tummy. But nonetheless, like, all those things make a difference. I'll give you a couple examples, and let's just stick on because I actually think like fat phobia, and I'm sure there's all these theories to go deep into it. So like, please take my words as a grain of salt too. You know what I mean? Like, there's people who
Your words
study,
are
like, do their
valuable too.
PhD on this shit. You know what I mean? Like, they have a whole dissertation on like fat phobia. So like, you know what I mean? So this is just my humble opinion, but like fat phobia, the idea of like, it's still ableism. It's the idea of like something's broken, something's wrong about you. Who you are is wrong. I know Roxane Gay wrote a book called Hunger. I think it was called Hunger. That one was good. You guys ever want to talk about, like, discuss how, like, about like fat phobia and how things work and what happens and how systems work? Roxanne's book, what do you call it? Her book, Hunger, is a great book to look into. I have to warn you though, it's not like you're feel good, so don't expect to read it and you're gonna feel like amazing after. But it's gonna give you this critical thought and framework that's really important because it leads you
Mhm.
to healing, right? And so just that, like, a couple examples I can think of that is, like, I always tell my friend, so like, for example, I go interpret a lot. I do a lot of stage interpreting, and so I do performance interpreting. I do a lot of like what they call platform interpreting. So I'm always like speeches and this and that, and it's its own thing. And usually you have to kind of dress up and do this whole thing. I hate suits. I hate, like, whoever said that whoever the hell said that you should tuck your shirt in and that's professional was a skinny ass person.
Mhm.
Because if you're a fat person, I spend the whole day battling my shirt. Trying to make sure that it goes around my stomach and stays in there. And when I could just be focusing on my damn interpreting, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And maybe a
Yeah.
skinny person's like moving, doing their thing, and nothing falls out, and there's no, because my stomach is constantly trying to push it out. And so those kind of concepts, how like someone doesn't have to think about that stuff. Or for
Mhm.
example, like, I have to wear a coat, whatever, because of my anxiety, and I sweat so much. It's a thing
Mhm.
we know. My teams know it. When I go interpret, my clients know already at this point. Like, if I start
Mhm.
sweating too much, I have to walk out because I get what do you call it? What's the when it just comes over? I'm blanking out. A hot flash.
Mhm.
So I'll get hot flashes all the times. Partly because of my anxiety, partly because I'm on vacation. There's all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
But just that concept that I have to layer on, like, other person doesn't even care. Like, they're like, "Oh, I'm cold in here," and they're like, and here's the thing,
Mhm.
not to take away from that experience, because I also know that that's very real for you too. You know what I mean? Because there's people who are also very thin or certain things, and things get cold. And I understand because I've been cold here and there, not very often, but when I am, I understand that concept. So they also are navigating around spaces. So every single one of us is navigating around a space that's telling you whether you can or can't,
Mhm.
depending on the rules that are given to
And
you
how?
and how. And then also it affects everything. It affects from like how professional I feel or not, because when I'm sweating and doing all, and then, like, when I'm constantly trying to adjust my shirt while I'm interpreting, like, that doesn't make me feel good. You know what I mean? Like, and so just like those kind of concepts of like shame, can really affect everything from how you perceive yourself at work to even your love life, right? Like it took me a long time to finally realize like that every person is someone's flavor.
Mhm.
It took me a long time. Like it took me proof. It took me like me having to. Oh, sorry, my dog's bark. Don't mind.
Oh, that's
People walk
okay.
outside and they go crazy. But just it took some time for that to happen, and so I really had to be very intentional of how to change my way of how I perceived myself. So I went from theory, which was, of course, I get to be fat and be hot, whatever,
Mhm.
and then, but it didn't mean I felt it here. I didn't feel it here. So it's your unconscious brain is very strong. So trust me, if you can't get it here, your unconscious brain is not going to be producing the other side. And so I really had to work on it. And so one thing that I did is I began to see in myself, see images of bigger people in sexual ways because I had not been taught that that was attractive or that that was anything, and so when I began to see people being liked because they were bigger, because they were fat and they thought themselves as sexy, it took a while, but it began to work in my brain. And then I saw it manifest. Like I saw it see,
Mhm.
like it felt different later on. Like, and granted, I like different body types, but I do like my little skinny. Maybe I like to be in a 1 and a 0. I don't know. I just enjoy that, I guess, maybe. But
Mhm.
but just that alone, just knowing that people can have different preferences of what they like or don't like, and
Mhm.
it all goes back to social justice. Someone told you that that's not who you are. It affects your life, it affects your marriage, it affects your love life, it affects every part of you. It affects
And let's
everything.
delve into that a little bit. So I think that's really important because you talk
Yeah.
about
Sorry, I hope you don't mind.
how,
I get all intense about
oh no, yeah, that
like, they're
this
adults,
is social
right? They're
justice
adults.
court. Yes, so everybody's an adult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a social justice course, right? So this is our goal, is
Mm-hmm.
to break down oppressive structures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're speaking about system, or I'm interpreting what you're saying in the social sciences way, right? So what you're saying is that systems, media, movies, um, education, even, right? Because
Education,
your teachers
absolutely.
wore certain things
Right.
versus students, dress code,
Exactly.
what's appropriate, right?
Right.
Even church as an institution,
Right. Like I
those.
could never close my button up. Like you have to wear the stupid tie.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like
Mhm.
my fat neck
It
couldn't,
won't
like the
work.
whole time you're like, like, and you're like, and it's not because I was it literally was pushing. Like when someone else,
Literally.
they're like, oh yeah, this is you know what I mean?
Yes,
So,
yes.
and especially when they like were in band and you have to like play an instrument and you're like,
Oh yeah.
and so I'd be like, it's just fat people problems.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, no, I get you. And like you said, these systems have sent a message, right?
Yes,
Through whatever
absolutely.
it may be, right? Through a TV ad, or whatever, the dress code, what's appropriate for people to wear, what's not appropriate. And it's our job as social justice activists, scholars, educators, to break down those systems, right?
Yes.
And and everybody looks different to different people. So one way that I do it is I am intentional about what I wear in the classroom, right? So
Hmm.
pre-COVID, when
Yeah.
we had face-to-face interactions, I grew up thinking you needed to dress professionally, and that included, dress shirts, slacks, shoes, and eventually through my I don't know, academic preparation, I realized that that has nothing to do with my ability to teach,
Right.
right? And I think after maybe the millionth time of being misinterpreted or whatever, or being confused for a student in faculty spaces, they would always say, "I'm sorry, this is for faculty only." And I'm like, "I know,
Right.
I am one, right?" I realize it doesn't really even matter what I wear.
Nope.
I'm gonna be. They're gonna think that I'm not, that someone that looks like me doesn't belong in that space, regardless.
Right.
So I'm gonna wear what I want to wear, right? So I will
Exactly.
go to work in chucks, and I will go in jeans every day,
Right.
Um, I will wear hoops because that's part of my culture.
That's right.
That's not typically something a professor would wear.
Right.
I love red lipstick, so that's
Right.
what I wear, you know.
Right.
And sometimes I won't wear any makeup because
And
that's
I'll
being true to me.
exactly. And can I give you an example of that? Because one person who I think really like, besides Selena, right? Because she was an
Hmm.
entertainer, but
Hmm.
that really kind of brought it and changed the dynamic, I think. And that's what visibility and the idea of
Hmm.
how visual parts of you can affect the rest of the world
Hmm.
is AOC. AOC
Yes,
straight up showed up with like a badass suit when she was walking in that famous
yes,
picture where everyone's
yes,
like turning and like looking at her. But imagine what that does. Suddenly she's walking out with
yes,
a suit that is just pantsuit, white, red lipsticks with the hoops, like
yes.
hair back, doing her thing, like Latina, like, and it was
Hmm.
fire. Like it lit up in the internet, people was fire.
Yes.
But what that does for you is that image redefines now what professionalism means.
Hmm.
And suddenly you the way you guess what? You're fire. You're badass like that. You know what I'm saying? It feels different. It looks different.
Hmm.
And it was the same action, but the difference was that an image can change how that
Right.
action looks and what it means, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because everything is a
So
social
now,
construct, you know?
exactly, and that's the purpose of this course
Sorry,
is
don't mind my
to
dogs. They're like,
oh, it's all good. They're part of the conversation.
right.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that that image that you're talking about is perpetuated through media, right? And through different aspects. Now we have social media. Um, even as just in her positionality as a politician, she represents something, right? So me, for my students, I I am intentional about presenting my authentic self so that they can see that their authentic self can be in this position as well. Because growing up, we didn't have a lot of those mentors or people that look like us from our communities doing quote unquote professional work, whatever that means, right?
Yes.
I'm also intentional on sharing my stories because I feel like a lot of times things that we struggle with, they're struggling with as well. But a lot of
Mhm.
times professors or professionals don't want to share that because they think that's being weak. But I'm very open with, hey, I'm struggling this week. I'm
Mhm.
struggling because my cousin passed away.
Right.
My best friend's mom has breast cancer.
Right.
I went through COVID.
Mhm.
And so I think being sharing that, intentionally sharing it,
Yeah.
kind of breaks down that system of like power, right? Because we're
Absolutely.
equal.
Right.
But if we pretend that we're better then that
Right.
perpetuates that power dynamic of teacher student. So that's one way
Yes.
in which I use my social justice lens to battle that. That's one way I do
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. And also like it reminds me just of I think that's been one of the good stuff that happened with COVID is the quarantine is that it forced everyone to be at home and then so like right now when you saw the dog bark and I was like my dog's barking and I'm like I'm
that.
muting and I'm like shh and
Yeah.
throwing something at her.
Yeah.
It's not even my dog, it's my dog niece I'm babysitting. And
Oh.
mind you, I've had her for a couple days with me, not barked once the whole time. This is the one time that she did it. Like,
They
bring
know,
him
that's
any,
why.
but that's part of it though. Actually, that interaction is what because I do most of my work in interpreting right now is all video. So,
Mhm.
um, seeing people from their dogs bark, babies. Like one time I was in this
Yeah.
meeting interpreting this meeting, and someone's child uh like farted like for like
Loud.
2 minutes. It was like the longest. And everybody was like, but and it was like and this person was like high up in the company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just that concept of like, but then everybody laughed and moved on because the company's
Right.
philosophy it has to do with like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're at home. That's normal.
Right.
Like. And
Yeah.
those kind of ideas, I think compared to like, for example, now that I went that year where people like that, I got that a lot visually and saw the interactions. My dog barks. I'm freaking out less than I was in March about that.
Hmm.
And that's how
Yeah.
much an image, and how you say, when someone
Hmm.
says when someone gets to see all those things, you break down that system, because you
Right.
can't lie to it anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, this is what I need.
Exactly.
No, I
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is not
Mhm.
true. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
Like even the giving the example of family, right? So my friend got in trouble for bringing her daughter. She's a professor at a institution that will not be named. She
right.
brought her daughter to graduation because to us that's a normal thing, right?
right.
She got in trouble for it,
Mm,
right? And so now when other folks are having to deal with it,
right.
now it becomes okay, right? And so
Right.
we are trying constantly to break down these barriers when something, everyone deals with it
Yeah.
to an extent, right? Some
Right.
folks don't have to,
Right.
right? But um
Or can
and so I think that's
find other means of, like,
to have resources to
right.
find babysitters and stuff like that. And I think it's interesting as a social justice scholar to see, okay, now that even with resources, you still have to take care of your kids at
Right.
work, how things are changing because it's
Yeah.
affecting the people in power now
Exactly.
versus the people that have been oppressed for so long now.
Exactly.
So one of the I think just to wrap it up, I wanted to see, well, first of all, if you have anything last words for the students of advice or anything like that. But we just finished up a topic of prejudice and discrimination.
Mm,
Oh, like let's say with the folks that you work with, how do you see? Because we're also going to move into ableism,
mhm,
privilege through ableism.
mm,
How do you
mhm.
see prejudice and discrimination playing a role in the communities that you work with?
Oh man, it's day in and day out. But a day in and day out, you're gonna see deaf people go through crap that hearing people never even have to worry about. Day in, day out. I can go sometimes to an interview. Mind you, I don't have a degree. I can just show up to interpret for it, and they will assume I'm smarter than the person I'm interpreting for that's applying for something that requires a master's or a PhD, just because I can hear. Like literally the only reason. Like, even for example, like, you think about the idea of uh like, how many people who deaf people who have their PhDs now.
Hmm.
Like, you could count them before when I first started the field. Now there's like a lot more. But why weren't all those PhD candidates there before? It had nothing to do with their deafness. They're still deaf.
Hmm.
It's because hearing people did not allow that to happen. Period.
Right.
And whether and it's not like hearing people are like, I can't wait to take deaf people down. That's not how it
Right.
works.
I
like,
think that's a bit. I think that's a big misconception with a lot of folks
yes,
that don't realize their own privilege. They're like, I don't actively do this. I'm not
no,
actively participating in these things. But even if you're like subtly participate, we all are. We all participate
right,
in these institutions and we're perpetuating something. And I think that's a really big
yeah.
misconception. I think you bring up a good point.
Yeah, most people, like, when I, for example, if I was to ask most hearing people right now, I understand they actually don't know much about hearing deaf people. So, like, when they'll ask, like, sometimes even like very dehumanizing questions, and yet on my side I go, oh, I understand why you're asking that question. Like, it sucks. It's all of that, and so the deaf person has to answer a basic ass question that no other hearing person would ever get asked,
Hmm.
and it's weird how I can see both. Like, yeah, I actually know that they're there, but I know that that person is also a good person. Like, I know them, and that works
Right.
for any community, like all of them,
Hmm.
including white folks, including everything. But at the same
Hmm.
time, even if it's unconscious and you don't mean to do it, you held back years and years and years of generations of deaf people to be able to rise.
Hmm.
So whether you thought it was intentional or not, it caused massive harm. So we have to figure something out,
Hmm.
and so, because it's not fair, like, if you get to self actualize, so does everyone else, and so how do we let people self actualize? And so I think that's probably, and so with deaf people, so go back to your question, do I see it? I see it all the time,
Hmm.
from people not wanting to provide interpreters, people not wanting to accommodate, even when they do provide interpreters, the situation isn't conducive to it. Like, they don't take in consideration a lot of things. Sometimes is they're being jerks and they're just like, we don't have time for that, right?
Mhm.
Other times it's I don't even know, right? It's all of it. It's all
Right.
of the stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a daily basis thing with them. Like every from beginning to end, like then my end shift. By the time I'm done with the shift, I saw a bazillion times that something went down. Whether it was a small thing, a big thing, it was them
Mhm.
constantly trying to navigate things. I mean, man, re- think I'm they're being filtered every single time. Imagine you
Right.
not being able to have your own conversation with someone like that. Like
Yeah.
this would have to
Mhm.
have a filter with someone else, and that person might have all kinds of other things in that's filtering through their brain by the time the
Mhm.
message comes out. Does that make sense? So
100%. Yeah.
imagine having to go through your whole life like that.
Yeah.
Someone always like it's almost like, for example, for us as Latinos or any other you know person of color that's
Marginalized
like a
group.
marginalized group that's going through shit. The
Mhm.
dominant group is the one that has to filter your message all the time.
Mhm.
Like you can't get it has to go through that person, and they might be cool, but like you know what I mean. Like that in
Yeah.
itself is already like damn, and
And it's
so
draining.
and it's draining, and then also we have the privilege to cut them off really fast. Like
Mhm.
oh, I don't want to hear you. Literally, they can just be like, I'm gonna stop you from communicating with me. Like literally, like they can do that. Hearing people can do that,
Yeah.
and so it's so yeah, you see it all the time. Both from and then it's layered. It's layered. It's not just deaf people, but it's like you had Latino deaf people to it. Like that's a whole other deal. Like in my like for
It's
example, my
gendered.
community, it's gendered and it's by country and it's by like for example, I do a lot of I work with a lot of I do video relay interpreting and a lot of my clients are from Cuba. And
Mhm.
so I do a lot of calls to Cuba because of it. And man, you want to add another layer to that? Like, there's like so many layers
Yeah.
of how people are navigating to communicate with each other, to get help to each other, to get like during the COVID, like, help, I need help right now. We don't have medication here in Cuba. And then trying to
Mhm.
navigate shit. And then this deaf person calls this deaf person, this is what they're doing. And it's like, there's a lot. It's so layered, so layered.
Yeah.
And so, but it's, we're doing our best,
Mhm.
and so just
Yeah.
that's it. Just keep trying and learning and allow yourself to be vulnerable. You
Awesome.
know,
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us, your experiences. It's invaluable, right? So we can't learn this kind of stuff in our textbooks. And I
absolutely.
appreciate you being here, but I also appreciate the work that you do, and I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you as a person. So
Aw, thank you.
hopefully that when we do come back in the classroom, you can join us.
Absolutely, I would love to. And thank you for inviting me, for creating the space. I can't even tell you how lucky your students are to have a really cool class like this and how fun and to learn, especially during this time. Because man, you can't. It's like every example out there. You can definitely have real
Yeah,
life examples. But
there's
one
tons
thing
of current events.
I know, right? But one thing I do just leave you with before I go is regardless of whether you are in a dominant group or you are in the marginalized group, because we're all everything in one so many times, just remember your worth is there no matter what, you know? Our insecurities and when we fight back against things, it's usually because we're insecure about our own worth. So just focus on staying worthy, for you knowing that about yourself, and then you can move along a lot nicer with people and can handle a lot more stuff. Just kind of try to get that part there.
So thank you so much. And we're gonna go
Yeah,
ahead
no
and
problem.
end there. But again, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.